With the highest quality socks, underwear, and T-shirts, there's no need for luck with Stance in your starting lineup, delivering the ultimate in comfort and fit. Stance has you covered with basics that are anything but. Go to Stance.com to find your perfect pair.
Listen up, people. We have a big favor to ask, and we promise it won't take up too much of your time. You know, our show is supported by some fantastic sponsors, right? Well, we'd love to hear your feedback. Head to podcastopinions.com and fill out a short, anonymous survey. That's it. We swear. Again, that's podcastopinions.com.
The Fantasy Focus Football Podcast is presented by ZipRecruiter. Most job boards overwhelm you with tons of the wrong resumes. Not smart, but ZipRecruiter finds the right people for you and actively invites them to apply, so you get qualified candidates fast. Now that's smart. Try it for free at ZipRecruiter.com/06010. ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire.
Fantasy, you're in the 06010.
Welcome into the Fantasy Focus Football Podcast. We are on to week 2. My name is Field Yates, joined as always by my father, Matthew Berry. We don't share a last name. Don't ask. It's a long story. And our friend, Mike Clay, who will be with us every Tuesday throughout the season. Good morning to you, Mike.
Good morning. Good to be here. Ready to go.
Good to have you here. Lots to get to.
Thanks for dressing up. You're welcome. I'm dressed the same way you are.
I understand, but I'm the slob of the show. Stay in your lane. I get to be the slob.
Hey, look, at my shirt button's all the way down. Fields only goes halfway. Come on. And he's supposed to be the stylish guy. At least I have a full button.
Field works out.
This is 2 buttons out of 4. A little bit of algebra right there. Never go more than halfway down a shirt. Many people know that, Mike. Surprised you don't.
No, all right. You look good.
Is that a rule? I didn't know that was a rule.
Well,
I'd never heard that one.
Half, it's a little bit aggressive. Like if you have a polo shirt with two buttons, don't go more than, like, that's just my...
Never go more than halfway down. Have you heard this one, Secret Squirrel?
I've never heard that. Also, I don't wear shirts with buttons, though, so...
There is that. You mostly just wear T-shirts of crappy bands no one's ever heard of.
Either that or he wears no shirt on your television show.
That is true. It is true. As everyone knows, Tuesdays are for nipples. Hey, Secret Squirrel, do me a favor. Let's put a Twitter poll up here if people know this about the button rule on shirts.
So say it again. Never wear.
My rule, and maybe I just made this up myself, is like never go more than halfway down the allotted number of buttons. Like obviously, if Matthew went halfway down on that shirt, like he might be arrested.
So if you've got 4 buttons, you never do more than 2 buttons.
Like I wouldn't undo a third one. I think that would be a little bit too aggressive.
Interesting. All right, we'll put out a poll. Kyle, you're on that. All right,
vote at Fantasy Focus. Probably our most important poll yet.
You should do a fashion podcast here, I think.
I'm on
Field
I
should.
would listen. I need it. I need
Field
the help.
should. You know what? That's what we should do. We should do a fashion podcast, and it's just me asking Field questions because I wouldn't know anything.
I could be a guest once a week.
I already have the title.
What's that?
Talking Threads.
Rewind. Fantasy news
from the National Football League.
This is the instant replay.
That's strong. I got to be honest with you. That is strong. Now, here's a question.
But he thought about it, though. That was not out of nowhere, was it?
Oh, trust me. Of course, I thought about this podcast before.
Hey,
beer and clothing one day.
So I just rolled up my sleeves while we were talking. Yeah. Where are you on sleeve rolling?
I'm okay with that one.
I did 2 rolls.
Yep, that's good. I think 2 rolls is good. You can go with a third roll if you scrunch them.
Right.
But it depends on the texture of the shirt. But
this is a nicer shirt, so I didn't want to go scrunchy. I also have no muscle tone, so I feel like you can go 3 if you're built. If you're like a young Keith Lipscomb, if you've got you've got those actual muscles.
All right, let's move along to the football.
Right?
Yes, yeah. Correct.
Move along to the football.
I've seen old pictures of you. Yeah, go ahead.
Football from last night. We had 2 games, of course, which is always a week 1 tradition. Let's begin. The Lions and the Jets. You have something to say?
I was just going to say, Secret Squirrel, we had 2 games and only 3 teams. That was what was exciting about last night. It was weird. There were 3 professional football teams on television last night.
That is not nice of you to talk about the Raiders like that, Matthew.
Stop it. Wow.
Of course.
Last night was brutal.
I just want to, listen, born and raised in Michigan, a lifelong Detroit Lions fan, Daniel Dopp. I would like to take one moment here before we dive in, before we give our analysis, before we let Mike Clay come in with all the stats to tell you how crappy the Lions were. I'd like to just open up the microphone and allow you a few moments to discuss what you saw last night in Michigan.
It wasn't a great start to the Matt Patricia era in Detroit. I'll tell you what, I'm a little bit nervous that Jim Bob Cooter might not be the offensive coordinator we need. He's the one I want, though. Matthew Stafford, what were you doing out there, man? Kenny Golladay, man, I'm excited to watch you play football, but what about the rest of you? Oh my goodness, what happened out there? We got beat by the Jets and a rookie quarterback, youngest rookie quarterback in the history of the NFL. I mean, I'm really excited to watch the Chiefs this year. Like, super excited. Patrick Mahomes and Tyreek Hill and Kareem Hunt, guys. Like, that is my new team. Oh, I'm excited about it.
Rolling with my homies.
You're all in on the Chiefs.
I think I could probably get you some Chiefs gear, Daniel, for some of my old friends.
I'd appreciate that.
See what we can do here. Let's get to the football. The Jets got walloped, the Detroit Lions last night, and the people are wondering this morning, Matthew, is it too soon to worry about Matthew Stafford, who threw 4 interceptions, a very Ben Roethlisberger-like effort from him?
I think it's a little bit too soon. Having said that, I'm nervous. I mean, in our War Room League, our 16-team PPR league, he's my quarterback. And I'm like, that's my quarterback. Listen, I lost in week 1. It's no surprise there. I mean, that was ugly. It was awful. And what, at first I was just like, well, I'm worried because they might get up big and then he won't have to throw. and then as the Jets started parting it on, I'm like, well, at least there'll be some junk time here. And he couldn't even do that. I mean, honestly, like it was, there were poor decisions. Like it wasn't fluky plays. Like it was just, he just played poorly. And listen, I think give some credit to the Jets defense, Mike, but Matthew Stafford did not look like Matthew Stafford last night.
Yeah, and that happens sometimes. I mean, we heard this about overreaction after Thursday Night Football, right? When Matt Ryan struggled. I mean, I'm not worried at all. He's been top 9 6 of the past 7 seasons. He has Stefani's not here, so I can say that, a much better matchup against the 49ers this week. Right. I think he gets right back on track. I'm just not concerned at all. We have such a large sample of his.
So we have our rank. My rankings will be coming up tomorrow, but I know your rankings are already up. You do the projections. For those who don't know, Mike does all the projections for us on ESPN.com. So when you look and you're like, oh, look, I'm favored by 20 points, and then you lose by 30, it's Mike's fault. So just at Mike Clay NFL if you want to send all your hate tweets. But where did you rank Matthew Stafford going into this week?
This upcoming week?
Week 2.
Week 2, I have him at 8. Against the 49ers. Yeah,
top 10.
Still a starter.
I will say this. If there is one positive sign, Field, about Matthew Stafford that you can sort of hang your hat on, first off, certainly the track record, the long track record of success that he's had in fantasy, but 2 other things. Number 1 is like they couldn't run the ball effectively once again, so it's going to once again have to be a very pass-first offense. And secondly, that defense looks brutal. Like, I think it's going to be a lot of shootouts for Matthew Stafford.
Yeah, the defense looks like a bunch of square pegs trying to be fit into round holes. It's just guys that have some talent. They just aren't necessarily in the right specific role, which happens sometimes when you change schemes. A couple of other things on Stafford is the good news is that it's not a new offensive system. So in theory, it's not like he's playing catch up. Let's not ignore the fact that he did get hurt last night and actually left the game briefly. Looks like a knee injury for Matthew Stafford. We'll follow up on that, whether it impacts his week 2 availability or effectiveness at all. But I'm with Mike. I tend to think the track record there and the really, really strong weapons he has, which leads us perfectly into the next topic, is do we have a new number 2 wide receiver in Detroit? Because Kenny Golladay last night was the best player on that offense. And I'm not sure it was that close. Kenny Golladay finished with 7 catches for 114 yards on 12 targets. Marvin Jones went 4 for 54. Mike, is there a new number 2 or maybe even the number 1, depending on what you feel about Golden Tate?
I don't think so. I think, and the reason for that is Tate and Jones have been very good receivers in the NFL for a long time, and they're still there. I mean, I still think they're very good players. But I will say this: I think the question isn't necessarily who's the one, or if he's passed someone out. It's can they support 3 fantasy relevant receivers? And I look back at last season. There were 11 games, all 3 played. They ranked 14th, 17th, and Golladay was 43rd in fantasy points. So that's pretty close. I mean, to the third guy being a flex option or a wide receiver 3. So I think if you knock those 2 guys down a little bit in terms of usage, target share, move Golladay up, you're talking about 3 guys you could feel good about starting each and every week. And again, I think Stafford will bounce back. They're going to throw it a lot. By the way, you mentioned the defense. I had them ranked 32nd as a defensive unit coming into the season. So I agree that they're going to have to throw the football plenty. I'm buying on all 3 guys right now as starters.
Last night, Marvin Jones ran 27 routes, Golladay 26, Tate 24. One of the facts I brought up in the preseason was I mentioned how Marvin Jones was on my hate list coming into the year. And one of the reasons why wasn't that I don't think he's talented, but in terms of he was a top 12 fantasy wide receiver. And I noted that when Kenny Golladay was there, he basically got half the targets. I don't have the exact stat off the top of my head, but it was something like he averaged about 10 targets a game when Kenny Golladay was out, and in the games in which Kenny Golladay was there, it was like 5.6 targets or something per by that. So when my rankings come out, I will have Jones and Tate ahead of Golladay, but I'll have them much closer together. I think Galladay's the real deal. I know, Field, you and I in a lot of preseason shows, he was one of those guys that we kept talking about in terms of late round flyers. So I don't think the Golladay thing is a fluke at all.
I'm with you guys on that, and the Jets may have a top wide receiver themselves, by the way, and a player that we weren't necessarily talking about enough during the preseason. Quincy Enunwa missed all of 2017 because of a neck injury. Pretty scary stuff there for the Nebraska standout. But last night, Sam Darnold, first game, and it was an ugly start for him. He literally was pick six on his very first NFL play, but he settled in nicely, and Quincy Enunwa had 10 targets. That was a team high for the Jets last night, Matthew. It seems like he is the security blanket for Sam Darnold. He also had 6 catches on this night.
I agree with you. And honestly, I think you can make a strong argument that Quincy Enunwa should be the number one waiver claim, especially if you're looking at wide receiver. I mean, when a guy gets basically half the targets of a team, I mean, Darnold, especially as a young quarterback, like we thought he would throw somewhat closer to the line of scrimmage, and he didn't seem to really, he had the one long pass to Anderson, but he seemed really comfortable in the middle of the field, which is not to be, which is expected of a young quarterback, and especially with a guy that's so solid in Enunwa. People forget that Quincy Enunwa through week 8 of 2016, back when he was healthy, he was a top 21 fantasy wide receiver. So this is a guy with talent. He's got nice size, and clearly there's a connection there. I buy this more than not. He certainly needs to be rostered in a lot of leagues.
And all concerned
a lot more
about,
leagues, I should say.
I agree on that. He's on today's waiver wire column. Mike, are you at all concerned about the volume for Robbie Anderson, who was a little bit, he was one-dimensional last year. Last night, he finished with 1 catch on 1 target.
Yeah, a little bit. I think Enunwa may end up being Sam Darnold's top target here. But keep in mind, they attempted 21 passes in this game. They got ahead early, did not need to throw the ball too often. So I think Anderson will be better. The one time he went to him, he obviously scored the long touchdown. He's a tremendous player. He's a downfield playmaker. Would not surprise me if he had a Deshaun Jackson-ish sort of season where the targets aren't really massive, but he's making big plays downfield. It's a hard thing to gamble on in fantasy, certainly. But boom bust sort of player. But I think when they're throwing the ball more often, which they will probably even this week against Miami at home, he's going to get more opportunities. So not fully panicking. I still think he's at least in the flex conversation.
The Jets have a couple of wide receivers running backs who have some value this year. Isaiah Crowell had a long touchdown run last night, one of his 2 touchdowns of the evening. And Bilal Powell also had 13 total touches, just 1 catch. Matthew, if you had to lean one way or the other, which one might you feel is the better bet to be fantasy relevant each week?
Well, look, going into the season, I had Isaiah Crowell ranked higher, and I stick by that.
Yeah, I think you should.
I think my argument for that was I think he's got a better chance at getting touchdowns. And over the years, when they've had a chance to go to Bilal Powell and commit to him as an every down back, they never have.
Yep.
Hey, let's take Matt Forte off the scrap heap. I know everyone else thinks he's dead, but we're going to run him out there for 2 more years because we just don't want Bilal Powell being anything more than a complimentary back.
Sure.
I mean, I think last night, honestly, was, with the exception of the touchdowns, last night I thought was best case scenario for Bilal Powell, where he was literally in a true 50-50 split in terms of the touches, in terms of the snaps played. My expectation, though, is that I think this is an offense that's going to be better than people initially thought. And so they're going to be in scoring opportunity more, and my expectation is that Crowell finishes with more touchdowns this year than Bilal Powell. So that would be the guy I want. But it is a committee.
I think the reality is what the Jets would like may not bear out in fantasy football, but I still think for now what the Jets would like would be Crowell to be their workhorse and their thumper, and part of the reason why a sort of thumper back didn't work in the past couple of seasons, they were so bad defensively that you just, when you're playing from behind, you can't hand the ball off to Isaiah Crowell 17 or 20 times a game. But last night, they had the positive game script to do exactly that, Mike, and if they're more competitive on defense, I think he's got a shot to push 200 carries this year.
Yeah, and I think Crowell's a good back. I mean, he's averaging 4.5 yards per carry the past 2 seasons. The guy's been effective. He catches more passes than you think, so he's still the guy I want for sure. I like Powell, but again, they've never committed to him. You just mentioned that. And if you're thinking long-term, like down the road, about mid-season, we're going to expect Eli McGuire to come off IR, most likely. At least that seems to be the plan. when that happens, I mean, they were talking him up. They were comparing him to LaDainian Tomlinson in terms of what that guy's skill set is. And that might be a stretch, obviously, but it tells me they want to use him as their passing down guy. So once he comes back, I don't think that affects Crowell much, but would certainly affect Powell.
One last thing I want to mention here before we move on here. The Jets have themselves a quarterback.
Yeah,
I mean,
good.
I wonder how Giants fans feel this morning, because Saquon was everything you wanted him to be on Sunday. But the fact of the matter is that we know whether it's this year or next year, there is a very short shelf life on Eli Manning, and Sam Darnold was there for the taking at 2 in the NFL draft. And they passed on him for a running back, a very talented running back, but they passed on him. And I have to wonder how they feel having seen Sam Darnold at 21 years old go into Detroit, play Bill Belichick's defensive coordinator, and light him up in a big way. I actually tweeted this. According to my bookie, the over-under on this game was 44.5. The Jets beat the over by themselves on the road with a rookie quarterback. They beat the over by themselves. I mean, like
we all predicted.
Like Secret Squirrel. What happened to your team?
Matthew, it was brutal watching that game.
By themselves, they beat the over-under.
For the people that paid for tickets to be there in Detroit, and then at that 6 minutes left in the fourth, you hear the JETS Jets chant over the stream.
Comeback of the week right there. Let's get to the Raiders
tough.
and the Rams. Is it too early to panic on the fact that the Raiders traded Khalil Mack? No, I'm kidding. They were thumped last night. 33-13 was the final. But how about Amari Cooper, who I think on the third play or one of the very first plays of the Raiders' opening drive had a 9-yard rush, if I'm not mistaken. They go down, they score a touchdown. He had one catch last night. Matthew, you were a big proponent of Amari Cooper going into this season, like almost everybody in the fantasy community was. Are you at all nervous about Cooper, who had a massive one catch plus one rush for less than 4 fantasy points last night in PPR scoring, 2.8 to be specific?
I'm not. The secondary of the Rams is as good as there is in football. And I think John Gruden and Greg Olson, the offense coordinator of the Raiders, realized that. And they said, you know what? We're going to attack the middle of the field. We're going to try to run the ball up the middle, and we're going to try to attack with, passes to our running backs and try to exploit, the middle of the field with Jared Cook. And we'll talk about that in a second. But honestly, I'm not. You think about the Raiders next week at Denver, also a very good secondary. I think Amari Cooper is going to be the ultimate buy low. There's going to be a very frustrated, there's going to be somebody in your league that has Amari Cooper on the roster that's going to be very frustrated after the first 2 weeks. I still believe the volume's going to be there. So no, I'm actually not worried at all. I think this is a matter of trying to plan against, one of the best defenses and secondaries in the NFL.
A good way to push back on those who are ready to move on from Amari Cooper, Mike. I'll allow you to answer both your Cooper concerns and perhaps dovetail that with those that are saying, no, Jared Cook is the focal point of this offense after he went crazy. 9 for 180 last night for Jared Cook. He was a beast last night.
Yeah, Cook's your boy, right, Matthew? So I'll try to be nice here, right? I know you love Jared Cook. Listen, they had 2 guys with double-digit targets last night, a running back and a tight end, Jalen Richard and Jared Cook. It was clearly a game plan. Of course, only 7 targets to wide receivers in this game. They were afraid of that secondary.
Yeah,
they were afraid of that secondary. They have 2 very good safeties for the Rams. They have 3, maybe 4 good cornerbacks if you include Sam Shields. They're loaded, and they just avoided that. I think it was a smart strategy. It worked early on until the wheels kind of fell off. They fell behind and couldn't catch up against that secondary. So, I'm not worried about Cooper. You're right. I'm interested to see what happens against Denver. There's some talk maybe Chris Harris will play outside when the matchup dictates this season with Talib gone. He may draw some Harris. He'll see some Bradley Roby. Could be another rough matchup for him, but I'm with you. He's a buy low. He's a guy you don't need to panic on because of this matchup, and get used to it against the Rams. If your receivers are going against the Rams, this is going to be a theme all year.
It's going to be very difficult to throw against that Rams defense, as you just mentioned, Mike, but Jared Cook will make the waiver. He did make the waiver wire column because if you have Greg Olsen talk about him more, Delaney Walker talk about him more later, volume certainly seemed to be in his favor, but I have a hard time ever believing that Jared Cook can be a season-long starter for anybody.
Jared Cook drives me nuts. I mean, you guys know this. Like I've made a long-standing, jokes about Jared Cook as well. He's, I always put facts about him in my 100 facts, or different facts columns because he goes so long without touchdowns. He looked good last night. I mean, I got to eat some crow. Now, it helps when you get 12 targets. And I will say this, I think your point about putting him on the waiver wire column field is a smart one. When we're doing a waiver segment on the fantasy show on ESPN Plus later, of course, I'm a company man. And I have Jared Cook as my number 2 tight end after Kittle, of course. And so if you look at the upcoming schedule, the next 3 games that the Raiders play were top 4 in the NFL in terms of most fantasy points allowed to opposing tight ends. So it's a really nice schedule coming up here for Jared Cook. I don't believe in his talent, but I do believe there'll be some opportunity, at least in the short going here, Mike.
Yeah, by the way, he didn't score a touchdown in this game. He scored 3 touchdowns total the past 3 seasons.
Oh, yeah.
That's unbelievable. He's just not going to deliver in that department. He took advantage of an elite matchup here. This is probably going to be a defense where we're going to funnel to tight ends throughout the season, including maybe Ricky Seals-Jones this week. So you can pick him up off waivers if you want, but you're taking a risk starting him.
The Rams have 3 good wide receivers, borderline very good wide receivers, and Brandon Cooks, Cooper Kupp, Robert Woods, who played Milo to Cooper Kupp.
Thank you.
To Cooper Kupp. They played all but 2 snaps last night. Every single one. Is that correct, Mike? 61 of 63 snaps for Cooks and Kupp and Woods. The final stat lines for them, Cooper Kupp led the way for 552 with a touchdown. Brandon Cooks had 5 for 87, and Robert Woods 3 for 37. Do we think that we have a clear view as to how you need to stack these wide receivers up each week based off what we saw last night?
I don't think anything changed. Like, so much changes in week 1. Nothing changed for me with the Rams receivers, right? They're all guys you feel good about starting. And Robert Woods had the worst line, right? At 3 for 37.
Sure.
He saw some long bombs too. I mean, Jared Goff just missed him for a couple potential touchdowns. And if he catches even one of them, that line looks much better. So I'm starting all 3 guys. We know Kupp's going to get work. Even being the slot guy, the small guy, he gets a lot of work near the goal line. Scored a touchdown in this game. Cooks is a playmaker. Woods got work downfield. He'll see big volume. They all play every down. The Rams led the NFL in 3 wide sets last season. They probably will again this year with Sean McVay still running the show. So yeah, I like all 3.
Any disagreement there, Matthew?
I don't. I still want to see some consistency from Cooks, which we haven't seen throughout his career. But if ever there was a guy that can get the most out of Brandon Cooks, it's going to be Sean McVay. But at the moment, given how explosive this offense is, I think you're starting all 3 of them next week against Arizona, to your point. And worth noting, this is one of those like, oh, wait, which one is Peterson going to be on? But Peterson isn't shadowing this year, right, Mike?
Yeah, he's going to be one of them tough ones because he played both sides in week 1. They're going to move those guys around, but he's not shadowing one specific player, right?
I bring that up because if you don't read it, Mike does a column every week, wide receiver cornerback matchups on ESPN. It's part of ESPN Plus, part of your subscription. You get access to that, and he does a chart that you can look at that basically details every single wide receiver and the matchup and the cornerback that they will face, and just whether it's a positive matchup, whether it's a negative matchup, whether it's a shadow, whether it's a zone situation, that kind of stuff. So it's really great intel, and so highly recommend that piece. It's something I read every single week.
We had a good week 1. As long as you skip the Mike Evans section, otherwise it was great. Great week 1. Just don't read that part.
You were down on Evans thanks to Marshawn Lattimore, but I don't think anyone expected Fitzy to go into New Orleans and light them up the way he did. There was certainly a track record of Evans struggling against Lattimore. You didn't just sort of pull that out of thin air. There was certainly a track record to go on.
Time to get into some news updates, and to be frank, some of these are just refreshers of news because there isn't a move the needle forward update on them. But Aaron Rodgers, well, there is no update according to head coach Mike McCarthy. They're continuing to monitor that knee injury that was sustained on Sunday night. They are non-committal for him in week 2 as of right now, and our rankings will be up later this afternoon. Aaron Rodgers will be included in, I would imagine, everybody's rankings until we are led to believe there's a chance he does not play. But let's keep an eye on this because we know with Aaron Rodgers, it's not just the effectiveness of having that knee at, maybe not fully healthy, but healthy enough to play. It's a really difficult matchup coming around the corner with the Minnesota Vikings.
And it's sort of interesting here. We sort of touched on it a little bit yesterday, but my expectation is that Aaron Rodgers plays, right? But I also think he's going to be almost entirely in the shotgun. I mean, I don't think he took one snap under center once he came back on Sunday night.
Sure.
And so my expectation is that he's clearly not going to be 100% healthy, but he's super gutty. So he's going to get out there, and he's going to be under center. I'm sorry, he's going to be in the shotgun, I think, almost every snap. Right? So 2 things I want to bring up about that. Number 1 is, and I know we're going to talk about Aaron Jones in the waiver wire segment, and you guys know I'm a Aaron Jones believer. I love Aaron Jones. I think he's by far the most talented running back on that roster. But Jamal Williams is who they trust in pass protection, and given this issue, I think the coming out party for Aaron Jones is obviously suspended for one more week anyway. But I think it's going to be a little while longer, honestly, because of how much they trust Jamal Williams in pass protection. The other thing I want to mention here is our friend Scott Barrett. Follow him on Twitter. Does a great job over there. He tweeted this yesterday, and I thought this was really interesting and smart. From 2015 to 2017, Randall Cobb was Aaron Rodgers' most targeted receiver when under shotgun, 17.4%, but his third most targeted receiver on non-shotgun throws. Last week, Rodgers was in shotgun on 22 of his 23 plays after injury. So there you go. Just, an uptick in Randall Cobb. I think some people thought, well, he had the one big play. Is that fluky? I don't know what your projections have Randall Cobb this week, but I would expect, especially with Rodgers in the shotgun, I expect, a lot more Randall Cobb.
Yeah, at home against Minnesota, I think if they want to win that game against probably the favorites, we all agree in the North, Rodgers is going to have to get the job done. If the running game is not going to win them that game, he's going to have to throw it a lot. And also, if the Vikings have a weak spot defensively, it would be in the slot right now. Mackenzie Alexander's beat up. We'll see if he plays. That's a tough spot there, so Cobb should be able to take advantage.
The Titans unfortunately lost Delanie Walker for the season. He was placed on IR, and although teams are technically able to activate 2 players from injured reserve, Adam Schefter reports that Walker, with an ankle issue, is officially done for the year. Since he signed in Tennessee in 2013, no tight end has more catches than Delanie Walker, one of the true warriors in this league. A bummer for us to see that for Delanie Walker. An already struggling offense after 1 week loses perhaps its most reliable player. We'll talk about waiver wire replacements in a minute. Matthew is over here hacking up a lung.
He's just upset about Walker going down.
Really disappointed in Walker going down. But we'll have some waiver wire pickups to consider in just a minute, but a bummer here, Mike, for one of the most reliable players in the NFL.
Yeah, for so many reasons. I'm a huge Walker fan. You mentioned one of the most underrated players in the league, good two-way player. I drafted him on probably 50-60% of my drafts, which hurts as well. So, I got to say, I'm intrigued by Jonnu Smith, though, right?
Keep an eye on him.
Yeah, they took him in the 3rd round last season at a Florida International. Listen to this, in 4 seasons at Florida International, 178 catches, just over 2,000 yards, and 18 touchdowns. And you know who he comped to? Delanie Walker coming out. So, yeah, up and down, rookie season. We'll see. Killed it at the Combine. Great athlete. I'm intrigued. I'm going to throw him on the end of some benches this week.
More names to note. Greg Olson's going to miss an undisclosed amount of time, although our sense is if he is not likely to play in week 2. We'll see about week 3 and beyond, but obviously another Panthers weapon that is currently banged up. Meanwhile, in the Bay Area, Marquise Goodwin is day-to-day with a deep thigh bruise. I don't want to say that this is good news because a player is banged up, and that's never good news, but you always fear structural damage when you see a player leave a game and not return. So some good news there for Marquise Goodwin. Perhaps we'll see him play this Sunday. The schedule gets so much better for San Francisco playing Detroit after playing Minnesota in week 1.
What do you mean? What do you mean by that statement? I don't get it.
So it could have been Buffalo.
Could have been Buffalo.
Could have been Buffalo. Yeah.
Are you the Buffalo of the NFC?
Ooh,
that's tough.
That's rude.
Detroit. I'm just asking.
You know what, Matthew? We started from the bottom. We started.
They beat the over-under by themselves.
I hear you. I was doing a Drake song there.
I understand. I understand. Hey, I've heard of Drake.
Oh, nice. Good for you.
I just want to point out and bring that up again for you, Secret Squirrel, that you hired a head coach who is supposed to be a defensive genius.
Yeah.
Right? He's from the Bill Belichick coaching tree.
I mean, at least
that was the focus of the offseason, right? To fix the defense.
I hear what you're saying, but at least I ranked Jared Cook this week.
No, you didn't. You don't do rankings. I will, in fairness, I will say you did talk up Jared Cook on your ESPN Minus show.
I did. That part is true.
That's true.
That part is true.
Yeah.
Field, keep going.
Moving along here, we have some more updates. Jeremy Hill is out for the season, torn ACL. He has been placed on injured reserve. Not a player that anybody was actively utilizing in their lineups yet, but he did look good on Sunday. The Patriots might be in the market for another power back.
feel bad for Jeremy Hill, friend of the podcast. He's been on the show a couple of times. Really like him a lot just as a person. Was rooting for him. Had a tough 2017 in terms of injuries. Felt like, hey, great new start. Had a great preseason. Beat out Mike Gillisley. Makes the Patriots. And you think, hey, here's a chance for a young player to, I don't want to say turn his career around, but a fresh start and a great opportunity. And then just to see this injury, I feel bad for Jeremy.
Could see some Sony Michel this weekend for the Patriots. Kenneth Dixon, meanwhile, is going to miss some time. That according to John Harbaugh, the Ravens head coach. Kenneth Dixon played more than I think we expected him to in week 1, I think in part because this game got out of hand so rapidly. Yeah. Not sure this really was a player that was on too many people's radars other than to be a handcuff to Alex Collins.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think there was some late round sleeper talk around Kenneth Dixon here, but it's Alex Collins. I'm not worried about Alex Collins' workload because of what we saw. I mean, the game just got out of hand. It was very Jets-Lions-ish, if you will. The Bills are very Lion-esque, I think. Detroit-esque, if you will.
Be nice.
Secret squirrel.
Be nice. Finally, the Patriots.
This is me being nice, actually. Wait, in all seriousness, Secret squirrel, what's worse, what I'm saying now or what you think sports talk radio in Detroit is going to be all day long today?
Oh, it's going to be brutal. Local radio is going to be so bad.
I mean, I'm just saying. I think I'm being pretty gentle.
There's only one place to go, and that's up.
That is true.
Or another 0-16
Daniel,
season.
the tweets were coming in last night that I was going to give you a hard time today.
I know.
I'm just sitting back here. I'm just letting Matthew handle it.
You can let Matthew be the bad guy.
Yeah, that's right. Look, I mean...
maybe we should have looked at signing Corey Coleman off the waiver wire.
Moving along, the Patriots have done exactly that, as Daniel suggested. The Patriots have added this morning both Corey Coleman and Benny Fowler. They had just 3 wide receivers on the active roster. You got the sense something was coming. Matthew, would you even bother throwing a dart at either of these players in fantasy football right now and add them to your league, to your roster?
I would not.
Okay.
I would not, for 2 reasons. Number one is, let's see if Corey Coleman and Benny Fowler make the roster.
Right. Well, they've already made the roster.
Well, but let's see them get on the field. You know what I mean? Let's see if they last a week, right? I mean, they signed Eric Decker, they signed Jordan Matthews, they signed Kenny Britt. I mean, they're trying out guys, and we'll see how long they last and if there's any fantasy relevance. Remember, we're only 3 weeks away from Julian Edelman rejoining this team.
Right.
And the other reason I wouldn't rush out to a waiver wire is that even in the deepest of leagues, guys like Brandon Marshall or Quincy Enunwa or Ryan Grant there's a lot of waiver wire availability there's really good wide receivers available on the waiver wire. I think that you wouldn't have to go to someone whose role is uncertain, on a team where while they don't have a ton of depth, they have very talented pass catchers.
Mike, feel the same way about those guys?
I do. I think you always want to keep an eye on great offenses. So maybe in a super deep league, deep benches, you could throw Coleman on the end of your bench. But I mean, the guy couldn't crack the Bills' wide receiving core. I don't know if he's going to get the job done in New England, but you just monitor it. But Benny Fowler, I mean, no statistical evidence here, but doesn't he just feel like a guy that catches 50 passes for the Patriots? So, just based on how his career's gone, just a reliable short area guy. So
he is reliable, except for the fact I will say that when Field and I played in the War Room League last year, if Benny Fowler would have caught that one touchdown, I forget the game, but you remember what it was? He dropped it.
It was a Monday night game, I believe.
Yeah, it was a Monday night.
The Bears, like the Broncos versus the Bears, maybe.
Yeah,
he played for both teams.
Yeah, he did. It was when he was on the Broncos. It was when he was on the Broncos, but it literally it
might
fell
have been the
into
Broncos Chargers last year on Monday Night Football.
Yes, that's what it was. Broncos Chargers on Monday Night Football. That's exactly right. And a short pass literally hit Benny Fowler in the numbers, in the breadbasket, and he just dropped it. No one was around him. If he makes that catch, a professional wide receiver, a catch that anyone could make. I beat Field Yates in the War Room League last year. Field doesn't make the playoffs.
Womp,
womp, exactly. The whole thing. I'm very bitter. Would have won a board bet. You have no idea what that drop cost me, Benny Fowler III. BF3.
All right, I'm going to tell you about something here, Matthew.
Is it about your Lions? Because I would love to hear you more about that.
It is about the all-new 3-row Ascent. It's the biggest SUV Subaru has ever built. There's room for 7 or 8 passengers with the safety and reliability of a Subaru.
And room for all your tiers.
It gives you 3 rows of flexible seating with your choice of second-row captain's chairs or bench seating. I'm a big captain's chair fan.
Yeah, you know what? And bench seating is good because all your friends that are Lions fans, they should be on fantasy benches.
It comes with plenty of interior room for your passengers and gear. It'll tow up to 5,000 pounds. Standard symmetrical all-wheel drive gives you the confidence for every sort of weather and road condition. It has a total of 19 cup holders and up to 8 USB ports for growing families and people who love to get out and enjoy this big world of ours. We could take the Fantasy Focus show on the road and just do a tour in this Subaru Ascent.
I have to tell you something very quickly. All that sounds great, but as somebody who is a father of a family with 5 kids, 8 USB ports was the greatest thing I've ever heard in my life. Because you have no idea when you drive with your wife and 5 kids and iPads and phones and tablets and I mean, it's unbelievable. Like the amount of like arguing that goes over about, hey, I need to charge my phone. Well, I need to charge my phone. Well, no, I'm using it for the GPS. Like the 8 USB ports is unbelievable.
Incredible.
People have no idea how important that is.
The all-new 3-row Subaru Ascent Love is now bigger than ever. Maximum towing capacity varies by trim level, and trailer brakes may be required to your retailer. For details, 8 USB ports, requires 3rd row, dual USB charging port accessory, and Field. Exploring the waiver wire is brought to you by the all-new 3-row Subaru Ascent. Love is now bigger than ever. Who's your number 1 QB off the waiver wire this week?
Let's begin with quarterbacks. Daniel, like you said, my number 1 quarterback is Tyrod Taylor, amongst those that are available in a bunch of leagues. And Tyrod Taylor, how about this in week 1? Played terribly. 15 for 40, 197 yards, 1 touchdown, a bad, unforgivable interception. And yet, he still was excellent for fantasy football purposes because he had 8 carries for 77 yards and a touchdown, and he has the best chance to continue to give you rushing ability amongst the quarterbacks that are available in over 50% of leagues. And I would just say this, not that I think the Steelers are the 85 Bears on defense, but it's a pretty good defense, and that was about as sloppy of conditions as you could imagine. A slow field for a running quarterback because it was so wet in Cleveland did not help his cause at all, and yet he delivered in a very fantasy-relevant way.
Yeah, I'm intrigued to see what he does in week 2. They're heading down to kind of hostile territory, but they'll be indoors in much better conditions against the Saints, a defense that just got destroyed by Ryan Fitzpatrick. I think that defense is good and will bounce back, but obviously a very poor start. So we'll see how he bounces back. He shouldn't complete 15 out of 40 passes. He is better than that. Not a great thrower, but he's much better than that.
Sure.
You mentioned what he does with his legs. Keep in mind, he's been top 7 in fantasy points per game 2 of the past 3 seasons. The guy, it's not really a fluke that he can play poorly and have fantasy success. So I'm with you on Tyrod.
The only reason Tyrod Taylor wasn't ranked inside our top 10 this year is the fear that Baker Mayfield may take over at some point. As long as Tyrod Taylor is the starting quarterback of the Browns, he is clearly a top 12 option. There's no question about that, Field Yates. We've talked about this before. And by the way, in addition to playing better and better conditions, I expect to see more Josh Gordon. I mean, Josh Gordon is an elite talent, and even though he played a lot of snaps, it seemed like he was in and out of it didn't seem like they were scheming for him a lot. I think they will scheme more for Josh Gordon going forward. And so just adding somebody like that, to every play, the big playability of somebody like Josh Gordon only adds to the fantasy value of Tyrod Taylor.
Let's keep rolling here with some of these waiver wire ads. Let's go to tight ends. George Kittle. Talked about him a little bit earlier on the show. 5 catches, 90 yards on 9 targets, and frankly, it should have been way more. As a matter of fact, if he made a couple of catches, he might not be available on your waiver wire if you don't have top priority because he could have had a monster day, an outstanding athlete. The 49ers are going to chuck it a bunch, and again, a lot of what we saw in San Francisco in week 1 is going to look a lot different after week 2 when the matchup gets decidedly easier than playing the Minnesota Vikings. I love me some George Kittle. I'm surprised he was available in 63% of leagues as of this morning.
I am too. We talked about this yesterday. I had him as my number 11 tight end entering the season. His ADP was tight end 19 for the longest time. We talked about this final 3 weeks of last year. He was a top 5 fantasy tight end. Granted, super small sample size, but we like this Garoppolo offense, Mike.
Yeah, I was a little nervous about him coming into the season just because he played so little in the second half last season, like 30% of the snaps. But yesterday that was not the case. 28% target share, and he ran a route on 28 of 35 pass plays. Full-time receiver, so you love that. Yeah.
Moving along, a couple other tight ends. We mentioned Jared Cook earlier. He went ham for the Oakland Raiders. And also Antonio Gates did not have a great week 1, but because with the Delaney Walker injury, the Greg Olsen injury, a lot of tight ends are going to be sought after this week. Consider a couple of those for your roster.
Field, if you were going to rank your tight ends as to like which one you would want, I would love to know like the difference between you and Matthew. Like, do you guys agree on where it's at? You want to, if you're putting in a waiver claim, which one you want first?
Gates for me.
Kittle,
Agreed.
Cook, Gates.
I would agree with that as well. I'll just go a little bit, I'll go a little bit deeper too. If those 3 guys are gone, Ricky Seals-Jones, who I was encouraged by the amount of routes he ran. He didn't really block on very many plays. I think better days are ahead for the Arizona offense and Ricky Seals-Jones. And then Jonnu Smith, who Mike mentioned earlier as well, who I do think is an interesting player that I know they like in Tennessee, and that role is certainly wide open there.
You're about to create the next ball hawk sighting in Madden NFL 19 because with more control on and off the gridiron, you'll define your team's outcome. Because when the lights come on, it's the decisions you made before the snap that determine what happens between the whistles. And what happens between the whistles is how franchises are built. And when you're on the biggest stage, it's about the moment and doing whatever it takes to hoist that trophy. In Madden 19, you make the plays that win you games. So now let's move along to the running backs portion of the waiver wire, arguably the most important part of the waiver wire week to week. We mentioned earlier that we do not know specifically what's going to happen with Leonard Fournette this week. There is not an update about his availability for week 2 other than we don't know if he will or will not play. But I would contend that TJ Yeldon has as much value on the waiver wire this week as any player if Leonard Fournette does not play in week 2 or perhaps even in week 3. 92% available, catches passes, Mike. Also ran effectively last week, 14 carries for 51 yards. That's not particularly effective, but he has run effectively in his career.
Sure. I think we all kind of thought if Fournette went down, you'd see a committee, right? You'd see TJ Yeldon and Corey Grant play a larger role. That was not the case here. 40 snaps for TJ Yeldon, 6 for Corey Grant. It's one of the run-heaviest offenses in the NFL. Obviously, still some question marks at the wide receiver position. I think they're committed to the run regardless of who the tailback is. So, yeah, Fournette's out. Yeldon, unquestionably a running back 2 option. You're going to start him this week.
Now, you don't know what would happen if they knew for a fact that Leonard Fournette was out, right? I mean, so it's one thing in the middle of a game, hey, we've got to do something, and Yeldon may have gotten more reps and they felt more comfortable with Yeldon in the game at that point. But if they knew Fournette were out, they would certainly get Corey Grant more reps and get him more ready. But I certainly agree with you that it doesn't look like it would be anywhere close to a committee. Yeldon would get the majority of snaps there. And I think Yeldon needs to be rostered in 100% of leagues, Field, because Leonard Fournette's rostered in 100% of leagues. And,
right. And that's the first time he's gotten banged up, and we know the Jaguars are willing to take a little bit of a conservative approach with Leonard Fournette. Sort of like a baseball season, right? Like not many people think of a football season in that same way, but we don't necessarily need him just in the opening weeks, but we need him during the wild card pennant race or the pennant race, I should say.
Missed 3 games last year, one of which, of course, was was the whole thing with the photo. But he missed 2 games due to injury last year. Fournette did, and they certainly limited his touches in second halves on some games as well as they were heading towards the playoffs, trying to limit his workload. So there's no question that even if he is, and we got a text from Stefania that he's day to day, but there's unfortunately, because he's such a big guy, takes such a pounding, there's a chance that potentially he gets banged up later in the season as well.
We like to look ahead on the waiver wire, so do so with Aaron Jones. He cannot play this weekend. He's still available in 58% of leagues. We don't know if he'll be the starter in Green Bay upon return, but I think objectively speaking, he was the best and most explosive running back Green Bay had last year when he did play for them alongside Ty Montgomery and also Jamal Williams. Again, this is end of the bench, or he could end up being a starter for you, but for now, this is sort of like end of the bench tinkering that has a lot of upside because it's pretty hard to find starting running backs available at this junction of the calendar.
Yeah, if you got through week 1 fairly unscathed and you're just like, hey, you know what, I'm in good shape, Aaron Jones makes a perfect sort of stash at the end of your bench, as we've talked about.
Phillip Lindsay was one of the best stories of week 1, played his high school football because he's from Colorado, near Denver. Went to University of Colorado, was a good productive player there, signs with the Broncos, makes the team, had 15 carries for 71 yards, plus a receiving touchdown in week 1. Mike, do you think it's fair to expect he'll have a consistent role for this Broncos offense?
I'll tell you what, I think the plan right now is kind of a 3-headed attack here. Something I compared it to was kind of like Chicago last year, right? Like Freeman's Howard, and then you have Lindsey maybe in the Tariq Cohen role, and then Benny Cunningham still. Devontae Booker just being irritating and coming in and stealing targets. Keep in mind, Lindsey and Royce Freeman were tied in carries in this game. Lindsey was third in pass routes in that group too. So he didn't get as much run as I thought he would in the passing game, which sometimes was a problem for Cohen last year. So I do have some concerns about them using a three-headed attack when the defense they're facing isn't as poor as Seattle. Obviously, they have some playmakers there, some holes as well. So I think there's some reasons for concern that there won't be enough volume here, but he looks good. I mean, it looks like it could work its way into a two-headed attack if they phase Booker out. So you got to get him on your team. I just don't know if I feel great about starting him yet.
I will say I would agree with that. I don't know that I feel great about starting him. Having said that, I don't think Devontae Booker's that good.
I agree with that.
One of the reasons I was so in on Royce Freeman coming into the season was I was like, look, Devontae Booker isn't that good, and once they get comfortable with the rookie Royce Freeman, Booker's just going to go away. What I didn't realize was that whereas Devontae Booker isn't that good, Philip Lindsay actually is. Mm-hmm. And so I knew they liked him. I didn't know that they liked him this much. And so I think it's going to be a matter of just comfort level with two rookie running backs. But once they get comfortable there, then I think you'll see less Booker. And I agree with you. I think Lindsay's a great person to have on your roster. And maybe you're not using him except in a deeper PPR league right now, but he will have a role going forward.
One more running back here is Austin Eckler, who had 10 total touches on Sunday for the Chargers. He had 87 receiving yards, a brilliant sideline catch, plus a receiving touchdown. We spent some time at Chargers training camp this summer, and one of the things that they made clear was they wanted to get Austin Eckler more involved in the offense, not at the expense of Melvin Gordon, who, oh, by the way, went over 100 receiving yards and ran the football effectively himself in week one, but perhaps, in addition to Melvin Gordon, on the field at the same time, and we certainly saw that. That, to me, is a name that needs to be rostered in 100% of leagues. So we ask you a quick reset. If you had to take these four in that order, my order would be as such: Yeldon, Jones, Lindsey, Eckler. Any disagreement from either one of you?
I have a different order. What do you got, Mike?
Yeah, I would say Lindsey, Jones, Yeldon, Eckler, just because I'm looking more long-term. If I really need a guy this week like Yeldon, like I'm in trouble, I have Fournette maybe, then maybe Yeldon goes to the top. But if I'm thinking long-term, I'm going another direction.
Yeah, honestly, I would agree with Mike. If I don't need anyone this week, I'm just looking long-term. Look, I love Aaron Jones, right? But if I'm looking sort of like both, I may need to use them this week, and less y'all long-term, I'll put Lindsey number one. And then I'd mention Nyheim Hines. Look, I don't think the Colts can block anyone. I don't think they're going to be able to run between the tackles. I don't think they're going to be able to stop anyone. I honestly think Andrew Luck is going to average between 40 and 50 passes a game. And so Hines, who is locked into that sort of passing down role, we'll see what happens when Marlon Mack comes back. But I do think Hines is going to have a consistent role in an offense that isn't going to be able to traditionally run. So I would put him there too, Yeldon, Eckler, and then Aaron Jones. But again, if I'm just looking long term, I like Jones's upside the most of any of them.
More waiver wire pickups right after this.
Fantasy, you're in the 06010. Focus. Fantasy focus.
I'm just noticing on the screen right here, for those of you on the Twitter that may have seen, so Stephen A., our colleague Stephen A. Smith, just listed his top 5 NFL teams over there on First Take. He has the Buccaneers at 5.
I will say this, they are a good team on paper. They have secondary issues. I bumped them down because the NFC is so tough and Jameis is out 3 games, but they are a sneaky team. There's a lot of them in the NFC, but the NFC is just so loaded.
They are a sneaky team. I would not have put them in the top 5 just yet there, but that,
they play the Eagles this week. We'll see.
There you go. It'll be a true test on Sunday. There's no question about that.
Let's get back to wide receiver waiver wire pickups, and we begin with Deshaun Jackson, who we do not know whether he'll be available in week 2, but he was brilliant in week 1, 5 catches on 5 targets for 146 yards. And 2 touchdowns. We know that Deshaun Jackson is going to be a bit of a yo-yo player. It's possible that even if he plays on Sunday, he has 3 catches. Heck, he was brilliant this past week, and he only had 5 targets. There are a lot of reasons to look at Deshaun Jackson and say, here's the case against him, but he is a player that has so much upside because of his big playability. He still might be one of the fastest guys, not named, Tyreek Hill or... Right. I mean, it's a pretty short list of players that have better speed than Deshaun Jackson. Let's get to Brandon Marshall next, because Marshall's available in about 94% of leagues. Now, a note, Tyler Lockett, his teammate, is not waiver wire eligible by our ESPN qualifications, but he's available in about 40% of leagues. So he's still out there in a bunch of opportunities, or a bunch of leagues, I should say, to go and grab him. But Brandon Marshall, guys, you buying this? We don't know when Doug Baldwin's going to return after injuring that MCL. But Matthew, you think Brandon Marshall has a chance at a legit role going forward?
I do. Not only because of the injury to Doug Baldwin, but honestly because of the departure of Jimmy Graham. They don't have a true red zone target the way that Graham was used last year. We'll see how, what happens with Disley, their tight end who had a big game. But honestly, if you saw in the preseason, there was definitely a connection between Russell Wilson and Brandon Marshall. And the question with Marshall the last couple of years has been health. He looks fully healthy to me. He looked like, yep, that's Brandon Marshall. Small sample size, but I think there is that Jimmy Graham low yardage, high touchdown role on the Seahawks available. So I am sort of buying it.
How about Geronimo Allison, Mike? Because he had a big night on Sunday night. 5 catches, 69 yards, and a touchdown. He's available in 90% of leagues. He's a player that's flashed before. There aren't a lot of third wide receivers on an NFL roster that you could put on your fantasy roster, but might this be one of the exceptions because of the Aaron Rodgers proximity?
Absolutely. They ran 40 pass plays in this game, and there was a clear foursome that they utilized in the passing game. Devontae Adams, 40 routes, Jimmy Graham, 38, Randall Cobb, 37, and Geronimo Allison was right there at 32, and we would have been a lot higher on Allison in the offseason, but they drafted 3 wide receivers,
right.
And we were like, could one of them kind of take that job away?
Sure.
And maybe at some point they will, but for now, Allison is playing a big role. He's 6'3". That should get him some goal line work, certainly in this offense. But yeah, any of these 4 guys are certainly on the fantasy radar. As long as Aaron Rodgers is throwing passes, he should definitely be scooped up off waivers. And honestly, he's in the flex conversation.
All right, interesting player because of the talent, and also the matchup gets better after week 2. They play the Vikings this week, and then it just gets much better going forward. Matthew,
I was going to ask you, do you buy Brandon Marshall? Am I alone on an island on Brandon Marshall?
Yeah, I guess I will. I mean, if their defense continues to struggle, they're going to have to throw the football. So as long as Baldwin's out, yes, I will. He's 6'4", man. He is 6'4". He's a weapon near the goal line.
You can't teach it.
John Smokey Brown had 3 catches for 44 yards and a touchdown in week 1, capping off, or I should say continuing, a very strong preseason. Matthew, you seem to have been a fan for quite some time, and you think this could sustain going forward.
100%. We talked about this in the preseason. There was a clear connection there. Honestly, I think one of my bold predictions that I had last week was that John Brown would lead the Ravens in fantasy points and be better than Michael Crabtree. I mean, the question with Brown has never been talent; it's always been health. Well, he's fully healthy now. Remember, in 2015, he was a top 26 fantasy wide receiver on a fantasy points per touch for his career. He averages 3.07. Antonio Brown averaged 3.05 last year. Just to give you the kind of potential that's there. Louis Riddick was on the fantasy show on ESPN Plus. Of course, I'm a company man. In the preseason, and he gave us a couple of bold predictions. And one of his bold predictions, by the way, last year his bold predictions were big years for Cooper Kupp, Jared Goff, and Kareem Hunt, 3 for 3. And this year his bold predictions were huge years for Patrick Mahomes, Joe Flacco, and Jimmy Garoppolo. And so, obviously, Mahomes and Joe Flacco off to big starts here. Look, their offensive line is healthy. Flacco looks locked in. They finally have receivers there. So, yeah, I'm a big believer in John Brown. This offense has supported two fantasy-relevant wide receivers in the past. So, give me John Brown. He's my number 2 wide receiver pickup this week. I prefer him to Allison. I prefer him to Marshall. I prefer him to everyone other than Quincy Enunwa, who would be my number 1 guy, because I think he has a very specific role. Allison, he's playing with Aaron Rodgers, but he's still number 4 in that offense.
Sure.
John Brown's number 2.
I agree on Quincy Enunwa is number 1 here. This column, of course, goes up on Monday afternoon, and Enunwa was added after the game last night.
You should have predicted that, Field. Come on.
Yeah, come on, Field.
I was smart.
Slacking off.
Jeez, where'd you have him in the position rankings going into the season?
No comment.
Wide receivers.
No, I had him. Enunwa was right on that fringe in the 192, like right last round pick sort of area.
There you go.
Where are you on John Brown?
Same. I had him and Enunwa were right together. But I'll say this about Brown really quick: 11% target share is not good enough. But he was on the field for 35 of 36 pass plays. That's good. So I think he'll be flex or at least a bench guy right now.
And I also think it's a weird game, obviously, because they were blowing out the Bills so quickly. I think in more competitive games you'll see more John Brown.
Agreed.
Just curious, obviously, if Quincy Enunwa number 1 here, if both Tyler Lockett and or Kenny Golladay, who are both close, Golladay is rostered in 58% of leagues, Tyler Lockett is in 52% of leagues. how would you order those three if you have someone that's, because obviously Field Europe column is 50%, so there are some fringe guys on there. Would you rank
Depends a little bit on what you need, but all things being equal, Enunwa, Galladay, Lockett.
I agree. That's how I do it. Yep.
Yeah, I would agree there as well. Galladay's pretty. I mean, I love me Kenny Galladay. So right there with Enunwa, I think be very close.
Okay, Matthew, if you want to get tickets to a game, like maybe you wanted to watch the Lions next week, you'd play the 49ers.
Football's back. SeatGeek is the smartest, easiest way to get tickets to every game all season long. Not every game is going to be the Lions game where people are just giving away tickets, trying to, hey, anyone you want it, leaving tickets under the windshield, that kind of thing. A lot of games there's going to be a demand for. And whether you're searching for a last-minute deal, planning a night out, or just need to find the perfect gift for perhaps your podcast producer who's searching for a new team, SeatGeek will help you find the best seats at the best prices, fully guaranteed. There's nothing quite like being there in person. SeatGeek will get you closer to the action for a great value. SeatGeek, designed to make your ticket buying experience easier than ever. By searching multiple ticket sites and grading every ticket based on value, SeatGeek helps you immediately identify the best seats that fit your budget. Plus, every purchase is fully guaranteed, so you can shop for tickets on SeatGeek with confidence. Hey, and it doesn't end with sports. SeatGeek has plenty of tickets to concerts, comedy, theater as well. Best of all, the listeners to this podcast get $20 off their first SeatGeek purchase. Just download the SeatGeek app, enter promo code FFF. That's promo code FFF, and you get $20 off, people. $20 off your first SeatGeek purchase. SeatGeek, life's an event. We have the tickets.
It's New York Times bestselling author Matthew Berry with another self-serving, self-indulgent, all-about-me promo.
Everyone here likes social media. Obviously, Field Yates is a master of it. So when you're on the Facebook...
Where can you find me?
Oh. Yeah, well, we can find you at Field Yates. But when you're on the Facebook, when you're on the Book of Face there, and you're searching around, and you're checking out people you went to high school with, and everything like that, why not go ahead and check out Facebook.com/Matthew Berry's Fantasy Life with an S. So Matthew Berry's with an S, Fantasy Life. Just follow us. Give us a like. We do all sorts of giveaways there if you like product. We have some fantasy minions there answering your questions as well. We have some funny memes and stuff. So again, whatever. You're on Facebook. Just do me a favor. They'll answer questions for you on Sunday morning, some start sit as well. So Facebook.com/Matthew Berry's Fantasy Life. And as long as you're on the social media, do me a favor and follow at MB Fantasy Life on Twitter and Instagram. Again, we post funny loser picks and that kind of stuff. All the things that are great about Fantasy Life.
All right, time now to mention Mike's Fantasy 32 column, which goes up every single week, and it's not even ESPN Plus, which a lot of your work is, Mike. It's available
Indeed
for anybody who wants to check it out on ESPN.com. Let's get to a couple of the highlights. It's a column that overviews each team with a nugget or nuggets that are particularly fantasy relevant. Mike, how about the Bengals wide receivers?
Yeah, John Ross is the one that stood out here, right? He scores a touchdown. Nobody was more excited than me. I looked at him as a great late-round flyer throughout the offseason on a lot of teams. But he's not a weekly starter yet. He only had 2 targets in this game, was on the field for 20 of the team's 30 pass plays. That was behind A.J. Green and slot man Tyler Boyd. So he's not there yet, but he does have big upside. Obviously had the score. The Bengals offense looks better. At least for now, just put him on your bench.
How about the Packers wide receiver? We talked about Geronimo Allison just a minute ago. What do you got there, Mike?
Yeah, not too much to add from what we just talked about. I mean, he was on the field for 32 of the 40 pass plays. We just talked about that. He's clearly in that foursome Aaron Rodgers is going to go to often. So that's of interest to me. I will say one more thing. Marquez Valdes-Scantling ran 2 routes, obviously way off the radar right now, but he was fourth in line at wide receiver. If someone gets hurt, he's a guy that'll jump onto the fantasy
I was just going to say, because as much as we like Randall Cobb is somebody who has struggled with injuries throughout his career. Geronimo Allison obviously already has value, but would take a significant jump up if there were any pass catchers that were to miss time. Jimmy Graham's also struggled with injuries as well, and obviously they play different parts of the field. But if you're on the field with Aaron Rodgers, good things can happen.
Mike, I'm a little bit nervous about Trey Burton after a 1-catch performance in week 1. Should I be?
You should not be at all. In fact, I was somebody who thought the hype was getting a little crazy during the offseason. I saw the optimism, but I'm like, this guy's never done
I ranked
it
him as my tight end 6. So I was I was all in.
See, you're crazy. That's a little crazy for me. We don't even know if Mitch Trubisky's good for sure yet. Yeah. So I was a little concerned about that. But I feel a little better about him after week 1, believe it or not. He was on the field for 57 of 65 snaps. 33 of 39 pass plays, targeted 5 times in the game. So I feel like he's more secure now as a tight end one because he played such a massive, almost every down role.
Yeah, I mean, look, Trubisky struggled. He was second on the team in targets. It was a weird game because the defense was so dominant and they got up big, and then all of a sudden, the Packers just had this crazy comeback when they were. So I think it's a tough game, but I'm with Mike here. I'm still in on Trey Burton. I have him in a number of leagues. So yeah.
Do we officially have a workhorse in Tampa Bay, Mike?
For now, we do, certainly. Look at Peyton Barber's numbers here. 47 of the team's 62 offensive snaps he was on the field. Handled 12 of the 16 pass routes by the running backs, which is important because he wasn't targeted and may not be a big target guy, but he was their clear top passing down running back. And he had 19 carries. Nobody else had more than 2 in this game. For now, at least, he is a workhorse. You look at him in the mold of sort of Derrick Henry plus. He should do a little bit more in the receiving game than a guy like Derrick Henry. But that's enough to get him in the flex conversation, upgrade him in non-PPR.
Man, I hope Ronald Jones actually sees the field. He was a healthy scratch in week 1. That's all we have for today, unless we have a poll result about buttons. And a man shirt should never have more than half of the total buttons unbuttoned. 81% of the people agree with me. They say that is true. 19% say that is false.
We also have a Twitter comment on that. Keith, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, you're not going to like this field, but I think the only rule for buttons is if you have a rule for buttons, you're a tool. That's from Munoz Topher.
If you have a rule, you're a tool. Okay.
Wow.
I can wear
There
that.
you go.
I know it's not a very happy
That guy's
ending to the
getting
show,
blocked by
but
Field.
yeah.
Huh?
Block him.
So I know it's not a very happy ending to the show, but I just thought
That's okay.
Depends on
At
your
least
point of view.
At least the Lions played well last night.
There you go.
Moving
They got
along,
that.
we are back on Wednesday. We're just kidding. Star Fania is back. We will have the latest on any injury updates, plus rankings conversations. Check those out on ESPN.com today. Follow Mike Clay NFL on both Twitter and Instagram. Matthew Berry TMR everywhere except for the Fantasy Life app where he's just at Matthew Berry. I'm at Field Yates.
Yeah, Fantasy Show on ESPN Plus coming up later today. Waiver Wire segment. Tim Hasselbeck stopping by. And by the way, I don't know if you just saw this on Twitter, sort of breaking news. The Detroit Lions have been relegated to the CFL. This is upsetting. I just feel this is too bad. This is what are you doing there, Secret Squirrel?
You can cut this out.
No, I was going to hit a button. I decided not to. I am. You know
go
what?
ahead. You can hit a button.
No, patience is a virtue.
We're back
okay.
tomorrow. We'll talk to you then.
Peace out.
Listen up, people. We have a big favor to ask, and we promise it won't take up too much of your time. You know, our show is supported by some fantastic sponsors, right? Well, we'd love to hear your feedback. Head to podcastopinions.com and fill out a short, anonymous survey. That's it. We swear. Again, that's podcastopinions.com.